Another Australian Open has started and ended, and it's been anything but drama-free. There's been plenty of stuff going on, and we're getting into everything today. For starters, let's talk about Nick Kyrgios. His prediction might be coming true.
Great second serve.
Kyrgios has always been pretty controversial when it comes to tennis. The Aussie always has some big words to say, and this time is no different. He may be the king of getting warnings on the court, but he had a warning of his own to give to the Open as well. We all remember his success with the doubles title last year, when he played alongside Kyrgios. But recently, he was asked where he sees the sport going in the next few years. His answer wasn't all that hopeful. According to him, tennis doesn't really like to accept personalities. If you're confused about that, you're not alone. What he means is that tennis really only marketed 3 players in the past decade, and now they're pushing next-gen guys onto the fans.
He didn't do enough with a drop shot.
Kyrgios thinks the tennis world can't really handle different personalities, and he gave Kyrgios as an example there.
Game, Kyrgios.
He says the player always has him glued to the TV, even if he's not winning the match. The Aussie thinks the sport needs to focus more on the quality of tennis rather than just hyping up the top players over and over. In a nutshell, Kyrgios thinks the sport is in trouble, while Kyrgios backed him up and said it was dying. Even though he ended up withdrawing from the Open himself, it looks like he predicted the future with those words. If you've been keeping up with the Open, you'll know what I'm talking about. It's the start of a new era in tennis. For a lot of people, tennis is just something they watch casually. This means they keep up with the Grand Slam tournament, which, for all of recent history, were won by the same people over and over. But even the players at the top couldn't make it that far this time. Carlos Alcaraz and Iga Swiatek, who are both #1 in the world, were out by the 4th round. Carlos had an injury, and Iga had to taste some defeat. In fact, the reigning champions were out as well, since Rafael Nadal didn't make it past the 2nd round, and Ash Barty retired last year. Even last year, there was no Novak Djokovic or Roger Federer, but at least Nadal was around. This time, they don't even have him, and suddenly we're seeing some new names around town. This new era has stars like Holger Rune and Sebastian Korda, not to mention Stefanos Tsitsipas. We're out of the time when names like Serena and Venus Williams were all over the news, not to mention the big 3 when it came to the men. There are a bunch of new kids on the block, and I do mean kids. Rune is only 19. Kyrgios might be right. If the tennis world doesn't catch up soon, the sport might actually just die out. Now, we should talk about what was going wrong on the court. One thing seemed to be happening over and over again in Melbourne this year, and the players were not happy about it. It came to light after Andy Murray defeated Kyrgios, which should have been a happy moment for him, except for one small detail. The match finished around 4 a.m., which does seem pretty unusual. Late finishes have been a long-running issue in the tournament, and there's no good explanation for it. The tournament director, Craig Tiley, said it was all because of the Aussie summer, but other players didn't seem to think so. Jessica Pegula, the #3 women's seed, said that it was really bad for the players, both physically and mentally, to have to finish a match that late. She said it was impossible for them to sleep in after it, which might affect their performance in other matches. She was right, since Murray had to show up again at 9:30 a.m. after that early morning finish. Tiley did suggest a curfew or starting the matches earlier, but the players weren't happy with those ideas either. But some players, like Tsitsipas, didn't have much of an issue with the timing. He said that 10 p.m. was a reasonable time to start things off, and that both players had dragged it on too long. But there's one thing that all the players might agree on, and that's the balls. The Dunlop balls being used this year have become quite the controversy themselves. Players say the balls wear down much faster, they get fluffier, and because of that, they get much slower. With that, it's hard to get good topspin, which slows down the match. Now the thing is, fans weren't happy to see this. Some of the most easily forgotten parts of tennis are the ball kids. They have a super important role since they have to be catching stray balls and prepping the court for whomever is going to be playing next. But after a controversial moment at the Open, fans are questioning just how much they get misused. The quarterfinal already had fans and players stressed out. It was Elena Rybakina against Yelena Ostapenko. And right before they were scheduled to play, the match got delayed. Rain isn't really something anyone can control, so the roof was closed and the ball kids were ready to clean up. Except they were doing it all by hand. The whole group came out to physically wipe the court dry, and the crowd didn't react so well to it. The commentator spoke out about how there should be a different way to dry the courts after rain, especially one that isn't so labor-intensive. Since the ball kids are all volunteers, fans on social media called it unpaid labor. Someone even pointed out that the US Open has machines to get the courts dry, and they don't have to rely on kids for cleanup. It looks like Melbourne's been in the news for all the wrong reasons. But before we go, we have to talk about the winner himself and how people aren't on board with that victory. Let's talk about how Djokovic might have been lying.
And I would just like to finish off
If there's one thing making headlines about the Open, it's the 10-time winner. Djokovic has taken the crown in Melbourne for the 10th time, and fans aren't really surprised. He's always been at the top of the game, but this time, some people don't want to accept the win. If you've been keeping up, you might know that the player managed to win the tournament with a 1.2-inch tear in his hamstring.
Yet more history for Novak Djokovic.
For most people, that's enough to keep them from even walking. But he fought his way to the top, even if it was painful. The problem is, the fans just aren't buying it. The commentators for the tournament kept bringing it up, especially because he kept taking medical timeouts for it. The heavy strapping he had only added to the drama, and people thought his win just wasn't deserved. He's been accused of cheating and faking it, but is that really true? According to Tiley and the doctors, it 100% is. They all saw the scans, and it showed that he was definitely dealing with something serious. The doctor said it was a very specific kind of tear, one where you only need about 10 to 14 days off your game before it heals. The player himself wasn't too happy about it all, and he was upset he'd been accused of faking it. He even said he'd post his scans on social media, but he didn't care enough to actually do it. If you're enjoying this drama just as much as the rest of us, make sure to stay tuned to our videos for more like this. We'll see you in the next one.